More talk with Jay Miller about developer advocacy and productivity. This is MacVoices. This edition of MacVoices is supported by you, our viewers and listeners, through our Patreon and PayPal sponsorship options. To learn more, visit macvoices.com/support. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. This is the second part of a conversation with Jay Miller, a developer advocate and podcaster. In the first part, we talked a bit about our respective approaches to productivity, both covering them and adopting productivity methods. This time, we focus a little more on Jay's career as a developer advocate, what he tries to do with his podcast, and more. So let's go right back to the conversation with Jay. Okay, so at this point, I want to make sure that I state that I will have my devil's advocate hat firmly on, that the questions I'm about to ask are not necessarily reflective of my own feelings, although, there's some gut level reaction to some of that. So with that said, the first thing I'm thinking is, okay, you've become a much smoother salesman for the company than
in some
before.
ways, yes.
And I'm kind of sorry you brought up Christina's name, because I am not calling Christina out. Not at all. Not at all. So just forget that you heard Christina's name. But do people that do some of that, are they in a different time? I think with a different mindset, you'd say those people sold out. They went to work for that company, and now they're developing their product, or they're doing whatever they're doing under that company's banner as opposed to their own. And one more, I never saw it as necessarily a bad thing, because to my way of thinking, if I'm trying to develop product X and it requires a lot more horsepower, a lot more assets than I can muster myself, it would only make sense that I would go in. If I could partner, great. If I need to go and work for that company and then tap those assets, that's fine too. But there seems to be a spectrum there, and the level of acceptability on that spectrum keeps sliding all over the place.
I think that is kind of the advocate dilemma. In terms of selling out, absolutely. But my response would be to that, selling out from what? Because for me, I spent 7 years, I spent a total of 10 years transitioning from the United States Marine Corps, going in to work as a system administrator with dreams of becoming a developer, being told that I wasn't qualified for developer positions, doing a podcast on my own, making no money from it for years. And then finally a company said, hey, we want to support all of those things that you're doing. We want to give you opportunities to write more code. We want to give you the ability to speak. We want to give you the tools and assets that you need that you can use in your own time to make your podcast sound, look, and feel better. And all we're asking you to do is to give presentations and serve the community on behalf of us. To me, I wouldn't really say I sold out from anything. And the folks that were doing everything volunteering and they were making no money from it, again, you can't sell out from something that you were never bought. If you're not making any money, if you're not able to continue to support a product, there is no selling out. And I think that this is one of the things that in podcasting has really, I don't want to say gotten my craw a little bit, but I was always hesitant to accept ads. The Pitch Show doesn't take ads. And a lot of that is because I made a promise once upon a time, and I'm a man of my word. But I have never been in a position, I've never had the listenership or anything like that would make me appealing to advertisers. But the content is still worth doing. So if a company says, we basically want to help fund the tools that you need to continue to do your show, and we encourage you to do it, and you don't ever have to say the name of our company on your show. That's the opposite of selling out, in my opinion. That's me securing, in one of the things that we say in Black culture a lot is securing the bag, making sure that you have the funds and the assets required to do what you want to do. In that is very much securing the bag. I don't have to worry about, will I have to take my podcast down because I don't have enough, money to pay for hosting? luckily they said, hey, we're going to pay you a good wage. I don't have to worry about, can I invite competitors onto the show? They don't care. They don't listen to the show. Can I talk with other people in the community? Can I talk with people that might not like who I work for? Absolutely. It's encouraged, actually. That way we can have civil conversations, and it's not tied to the company name, to where the company the naysayers that are probably calling me a sellout would also say, well, that's all staged and they're trying to do this for goodwill. It's like, I mean, no, they're not. They don't care. What they do care about is that they have people that work for them that are representing, again, their potential users, their existing users, and also showing the human side of these big companies. And I feel like anybody that's an advocate that's failing to do that, I'm not going to say that you should probably get out of the industry, but I think that you should evaluate the value that you're bringing to the company and whether or not that could be adjusted.
So I did not know any of that part of the history of your operation. So that question was asked in complete innocence, and the listeners can believe that or not, because it's true. I was thinking more about Christina and some of the things we were discussing earlier. So that's really interesting, I guess, as thinking about the development of, I guess, of the advocate position. Call it evangelist, call it advocate, call it what you will. That's and it's also interesting that companies have developed to the point of supporting things that, to your point, and I love the way you said that the content is not necessarily attractive to advertisers, but it's still worth doing. That's a kind of a key, I think, a key phrase in there that you said.
I mean, I look at it from the perspective of the pitch of stepping away from productivity was probably the worst branding decision I could make, because productivity is a buzzword. So if anything, I'm going to get just random clicks. And that's kind of what I wanted to avoid. I wanted to have deliberate conversations. I wanted deliberate listeners to listen to deliberate conversations. So for me, I'm only probably ever going to have a few hundred people listening to the show at one time. That's okay. I gave up a Facebook group of thousands of people and turned it into a very small community. And there are a lot of folks that come through the MacVoices lineup. Allison Sheridan, being one of my favorites. I see how tight her community is. I see how intimate the conversations that she has, and I'm a part of that community, getting to see the conversations as she's recording live, and seeing what you're doing now on YouTube with MacVoices Live, and having those conversations. And it feels like a bunch of friends coming onto the show, and people are welcome and invited to participate. Now, maybe they don't come onto the show and participate. Maybe they do it in chat, but you're reading comments, you're having those conversations. You may be lucky enough to be one of those, that 1% of podcasts that have enough, audience to get advertising and to get all those things, or get be attracted by, podcast networks. But that's not the case for most people. But I can tell you now, and I did another show called Friends in Our Ears, and we made up a fake podcast called the Yoda LA, which is literally the Los Angeles Yodeling Club podcast. It doesn't exist. I wish it did. But here's the thing. There would probably be 5 people that listen to that podcast. Those would be 5 of your closest friends. And anything that you would want to help advocate for those 5 people, they would be there to listen, and they would be there to react and make an impact. And we see that time and time again. You have these small circles that make a large impact. We see this just happen with GameStop and this whole stock thing that happened. I don't trade, so I don't know much about it. But at the end of the day, it is the voices of the few that can make a very loud statement. But you have to have those communities set up, and they have to be supported. And if they're not supported, they die. And that's where those voices start to disappear. And I've been a part of, groups that have kind of faded away. I've been a part of shows that have unfortunately just kind of met their natural end. And it always hurts. And if a company is willing to help stop a little bit of hurt, especially nowadays in this time and age, like, I'm on board with that.
couple things that I want to react to. I agree with you completely on the small tight knit communities. Would I love to have an audience of millions? Of course I would. Who wouldn't? But I think by the nature of what we both do, we are targeting, not even targeting. We just attract a smaller, a niche kind of clientele. As I record this, last Friday, I had dinner with a friend and his wife and his daughter. And his daughter, who is, I guess she's 8, 9 years old, was making fun of me for how many followers I have on my YouTube channel. And she was like, you only have followers with a K. All my YouTube friends have followers with an M. And I was like, okay, and she said, you should play more games on your show. And I was like, well, that's kind of not the point. And so I'm trying to have this relatively intellectual conversation with someone who clearly has a completely different focus than I do. But she's not wrong. Yes, if I played games, I could probably get millions of, well, I don't know if I could, but somebody could get millions. And yet that's not what it's about. That's not, if people find the show and if people find your show, great. And we're going to encourage people to share it, but neither one of us are producing content to attract followers. We're producing content, it sounds like, the kind of content we want to produce and that we want to consume.
Absolutely. And I will say, like, I can probably count on one hand the names of people that I remember from high school. And I mean, granted, that wasn't too long ago. It was over a decade ago. We'll just say that. But I can easily rattle off the names of people that listen to the show and comment and thank me for what I'm doing. And often they're the people that I bring onto the show to have those conversations, because we attract the people that we're looking for. And for me, I'm always looking for interesting people with interesting stories. And it's always amazing to hear, when you're having them on for an interview and you don't think that they listen, and they go, hey, I'm a big fan of your show. I really love that, that interview that you did with this person. You're just like, what? Like, you're one of the 300?
Yeah, I've had the same experience. People come up and say, oh yeah, I've been listening to you for a long time. It's like, really? I didn't know anybody was listening. I just keep putting the stuff out, and once in a while I'll get a comment or email back. But so yeah, it is funny. It is funny. Do you find, what are your thoughts on the fact that we have a chance to reach out to the world? It's not just your city, my city, the United States, North America. It's the world. I've gotten emails from, a whole lot of different places, and it's not a case of bragging. It just always strikes me that, yeah, somebody somewhere in a little town in a country that I barely know said, hey, yeah, I heard this show, great, or I really got something out of it. And first of all, that's a huge ego pump. There's no question, but it reminds me that I'm just not producing stuff for the East Coast or for the United States, but I'm producing something that can be listened to anywhere. And you're doing the very same thing.
I think that first, I want to say I think it's absolutely wonderful, and I have another tangent that we can run on in a second. But I think it's also important that we remember that, because there are times when our voice is louder than what's going on in current events, than what's going on in the news. And when people hear about stuff, I do another show with a friend of mine in the UK called Ask a Brit. And it's a little unique show that we do. It's really short. I ask him a bunch of questions about British culture. And the second season we did, he actually asked me questions. And it was all based on the election stuff. And he was like, well, why are there lawsuits? And in my comedic tone, I said, well, I mean, this is America. You have to have a lawsuit to get anything done. You want to order a burger at McDonald's, you got to come up with a subpoena first. Like, you're not going to get nuggets without a court appearance. And in my mind, I thought about that, and then I feel bad about it now, because that's now someone who may not understand English as well, or even if they think I'm joking, they now think, oh, every American is just waiting for an opportunity to sue somebody, which is not the case. And it wasn't the point. It wasn't the intention. So in many ways, we have to remember that even though we didn't sign up for it, no one said whenever we created our Libsyn or whatever account, so like, hey, now don't forget anything you say or do can make it look like all Americans do this. But we do have to take that responsibility and remember it. And that's one of the things that in my role that I try to do and I try to be aware of, not just in the perspective of let's just show the best of what our company can do and let's show the American centric voice. The company that I work for is international. We have people all over the world. We have a community that's international. Let's focus on that. Let's have people come in and do interviews and talk to them. And let's not force them to speak English. In fact, we make everybody else read subtitles in English all the time. How about we read subtitles for once and let them be able to answer questions in their native language where they're most comfortable? And the thing is, when we do little things like that, we put ourselves out of the way a little bit. We think about what we're saying. We think about how it's going to be, viewed across the world. That's when we get those thank you letters from people, those thank you emails, I should say. No one really writes letters anymore. I wish they did. But that's when we get comments that are like, oh, I'm so glad that this is in Portuguese. Oh, I love that this is in Mandarin. Like all of these little things that we do to cater to our international audiences, it winds up making a bigger impact because no one else out there is doing it. So when the little guy says, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it for all the people out there, they go, heck yeah, I like them. Let's become a super fan of them. Let's, make sure that we're supporting them by clicking the ads and doing all this other stuff.
I've had this experience years ago, and I've had it at MacStock, and I will have it again at MacStock, I know, where you find that you sit down with people around a dinner table or just around a discussion table or whatever, and they're people there from 3, 4, or 5 countries who have some have very similar cultural backgrounds from the country standpoint, and others just completely different. And you find them joking and teasing each other about some of the differences, but the joking and teasing is always completely good-natured, as opposed to some of the vitriol we see in the media. And I love that. I love the fact that we can sit down and have those differences, laugh about them, and actually tease someone about. I will pick on Don McAllister since he's not here, but tease Don about his accent. That he's got a great voice, but that accent, that's what got him his listeners. And we've teased Don about that a lot. And of course, it's all absolutely very good natured. There's no jealousy or anything like that. And so if we could get more of that in the world, and you talking about us putting ourselves out there a little more, it's something that's really difficult to do, and you try to think about it, and just sometimes it's just not realistic to do. I'm sorry, I'm never going to learn to speak Mandarin. It's just probably not in the cards. Not that I wouldn't like to, but it's just probably not going to happen. But you do your best, or you just try to say, okay, I'm going to put this information out there in the most neutral fashion possible, so that it can be consumed in the most neutral fashion possible.
Absolutely, and I think that at the end of the day, if you're doing your best, they can't ask for more. And I get it that I have struggled with this for so long, because one of the things that I've wanted to do for my show for the longest is actually have good transcriptions, because it's an accessibility feature. It's not an SEO thing. I don't even look at it for the SEO. Again, if I wanted to keep it SEO friendly, I would have kept productivity in the name. But for me, it was important that there are people out there that could get something from my content but aren't able to due to some accessibility limitation. And I started just doing kind of the automated transcriptions and letting Amazon and Google handle that. And what I realized after a while was that those were just so bad that it made more confusion than it helped. And I would still, to this day, if I had the extra money to get all of my, stuff transcribed, then I would do it 100%. I would get it transcribed in every language that people ask for. However, that comes at a cost, and it comes at a very expensive cost, especially when you're, bootstrapping your own podcast. But I think that's where it comes back to that whole idea of whether or not we're selling out. I think about all of the potential opportunities. Like, sure, my podcast won't have transcriptions, but the YouTube series that I'm doing for my employer, the possible podcast that we're trying to get going, all of those things will absolutely have transcriptions. They will be localized. If someone says, "Hey, I'd love it in my language," we will figure out a way to get it in your language. And I think that is the side effect of being a quote unquote sellout.
I want to make sure we're clear here. The sellout thing, I'm probably going to get emails for that. And, so be it if that's the way you see it.
Nobody email Chuck about that.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. I appreciate that. But I think it's a question that has to be asked. Listen, you could sit there and accuse me too, because we accept advertising. Now, we're selective with what we take. I don't just take anything that comes down the pike. But to your point, there are bills to be paid. And, as much as I'd love to say that the Patreon supporters and PayPal supporters are sufficient, they're not. So I have a choice. I can either try to fund it myself, which, after a while becomes just flat out unwieldy, or you can accept advertisers, or you can just say, you know what, I'm not going to do it, and not put the content out there. And so no matter how much fun I have doing this, you got to pay the bills. And that we're not going to do it here, but that's another conversation about free software and free services and free this and free that. And, the subscriptions and that whole thing that just drives me crazy, because at the end of the day, the bills have to be paid by somebody. You're choosing one path, I'm choosing another. Some of our other friends that do shows, have all kind of different paths they've chosen. That's fine. That doesn't invalidate the content. It just means that this is what we've chosen to make things work.
Absolutely. And I will say I guess the short reply to that is support local developers, support small developers. A lot of them are torn on whether or not they make their products free, whether or not they give the extended trials, whether or not they charge, $2.99 for a product that took them 2 years to develop. If the big companies can get away with charging you $20 a month for their photo editing software, not calling any of those companies out, but I think that we can give, the drafts, the Fantasticals, we can give them $10 a year. Like that's doable. That's a few cups of coffee. And if you're not in a position to where you can't, if you're genuinely in a position to where you cannot afford, the $10 a year, give me a call. Give me an email. Like, I promise you, we'll have a conversation. And if you really can't do it, I'll do it for you, because it makes no sense that these developers are out here literally working on their dream job. And the thing that gets those products acquired 9 times out of 10 is them saying, I'm tired of having to deal with support calls and not getting paid for it. I'm tired of building this product and no one wants to pay for it. If this company will give me millions of dollars and I can just be done with it all and let them do whatever they want with it, at this point, it might be worth it. So if you really love that product that you're using, pay for it.
That's so well said. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I like to think that developers are earning the money that I pay them, whether I'm paying in subscription or whether it's a one-time thing. They get to set the terms. Nobody's putting a gun to my head and says, you have to subscribe to this. I'm choosing to subscribe to it. And so if they're delivering the value, then great. And if they're not, then somebody else probably will. And that's competition.
Yeah. And if it's not worth paying for, don't use the app. But don't complain about it. That's always the worst reviews of someone saying, it's a great app, but why did it have to go to the subscription model? The answer is because no one was paying for it when it didn't go through the subscription model. So you get what you pay for, or don't pay for it.
Or not paying enough for it to keep the developer engaged.
Exactly.
One of the two. Nope, I agree. Jay, this has been fascinating and a lot of fun. And there's so many different things that I think we could have jumped off on. And you've got to come back and we'll do more jumping around. I'm not sure we'll learn anything, but we'll certainly think a lot about it.
That tends to be the lane I stay in, is like, just food for thought.
Yeah, but that's
food
good.
in general. I like food, so
I'm with you there. Okay, so when you're not here talking to me, where can folks find you selling out?
Well, mostly on Twitter. I'm a big sellout on Twitter. KJY Miller. That is all the places: Twitter, LinkedIn, not Facebook. I don't do Facebook or Instagram because they're owned by Facebook. But KJY Miller, kjymiller.com is the website. There will be links to the podcast and the projects that I do. Also, we're recording this during International Women's History Month, so make sure you tell some lady out there that you appreciate what they're doing.
God, so well said. So well said. Jay, thank you. It's a pleasure. We will definitely have you back. I want to see you on Mac Voices Live, and we'll just keep the conversations going.
As soon as I get that invite, I'm there. I'll tell you.
All right. Sounds good. All
right.
Folks, he's Jay Miller. I'm Chuck Joyner here, selling out on Mac Voices. We're all just a bunch of sellouts. What are you going to do?
I feel like that's going to be a show title.
I don't do show titles, but it could be. It could be. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Voices. Come back anytime. You never know what you're going to find here. Thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with Mac Voices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.